I think that the real reason that a lot of times we have all these distractions and we don't make the time to write the book or write the website or, plan out the course or whatever we're trying to do in our practices is because we're actually just afraid to sit there and face it. And that's an emotional issue.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. You're about to hear how my guest wrote a book that matters. For a full year, she sat herself down and focused in on this project, which is now a significant part of her legacy. If you're considering writing a book or taking on any big and important project, you're going to want to hear this. Laura Mae Northrup is an author, educator, somatic psychotherapist, and podcaster. Her book, Radical Healership, which came out in February, is a spiritually informed and anti-capitalist guide for healing practitioners who seek to build a values-driven healing practice. She's the host and creator of the podcast Inside Eyes, an audio series about people using entheogens and psychedelics to heal from sexual trauma. Her work focuses on defining sexual violence through a spiritual and politicized lens, mentoring healing practitioners in creating a meaningful path, and supporting the spiritual integrity of our collective humanity. Let's get into it with Laura. All right, Laura, I'm so excited to dive in with you.
Me too. I'm so happy to be here, Annie.
So I want to talk to you about your business as it is now. I want to dive into your book, your amazing book that I got to read, and the writing of your book. But I would love to start with you giving us kind of an overview of what your business looks like right now. So I know you've got healing work that you do, and you also work with healers. Can you tell us about how that all works?
Yeah. So I have kind of the way I think about it is I have my sort of in-person clinical practice. And in that world, I see psychotherapy clients, and then I also do consultation, and then I also supervise early career clinicians who are, getting their hours for becoming MFTs. So that's the kind of like bulk of what's sort of like locked into a schedule. And then the other things that I do, well, I wrote a book, I made a podcast, like an audio series, which I plan to add a little bit more to soon. And then I often will teach on my other days where like sort of different gigs, kind of flying in and out on my schedule. And then I do a number of things like interviewing on other people's shows or kind of just like a variety of stuff that I get asked to do that's a little bit more uncategorizable.
So tell us about how the hell you got your book written with everything else going on in your life. How did you decide to write it, and how did you carve out the space and the energy and the time to write it?
That is such a good question. Um, yeah, so writing a book is a lot. It's really hard. So basically, I'll tell you how I ended up getting this book contract. So I put out my podcast Inside Eyes in, I think it was coming out in 2019 maybe. Yeah, 2019. And after I released that podcast, I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to write like a book version of this podcast. And the podcast is about people using psychedelics and entheogens to heal sexual trauma. So that's what I thought I was going to be writing a book about.
Can we pause there for 1 second? Because there's something here I don't want to forget to ask you to share, is that you got messages from folks that podcast was not going to work, right?
I did. Yes, I did. I did.
And so I want to know that because someone listening has an idea of something that they really want to bring to the world. This is going to make me start crying. Somebody is feeling like, okay, there's this thing I want to create, but it's like this kind of tender, vulnerable offering. And then they hear from someone else, no, that's not valuable, or no, people don't want that. And then some of them may just sort of crumble and say like, okay, well, that I'm not good enough, or that isn't, who was I to think I should do that? So I just wanted to throw that important piece in there.
Absolutely. And, if that person is listening right now, like, I just want to say, do it. Like, do it, and do it even if it doesn't work, because you'll learn and you'll do it again and you'll make it work. And, like, part of what where I feel like politically part of where I'm like situating my book is we are just living in a world so full of trauma. We need so many people to be good healing practitioners. So if you're even just like kind of questioning or like you have an offering, and you're like, "Oh, is it going to happen?" I'm like, "Get out there, do it. We got to get really good at this, everybody, because like we're not going to survive our own coping mechanisms as a species without people who are really awesome healing practitioners." And so I'm just like, take the jump, like do it. Yeah, and also I share this in the book. When I was gonna make my podcast, I was like working on it really hard and it's really emotional, tender stories from people about their own trauma and their own healing journeys. And I was told by people that they didn't think it was gonna be entertaining enough and they didn't think there'd be enough people who would wanna listen. I also think that comes from a place of people not really understanding how common sexual violence is and how much people are actually just really, really, really needing support. So, yeah, and I went through a whole process of like, should I make my podcast more entertaining? How would I make it entertaining? But, as a therapist and just as a human being, I'm just really not into taking people's trauma and turning it into entertainment. And so I stuck with it. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it the way that it feels the most ethical. These people are really trusting me to tell their stories. And I don't want to mistreat them. And that's not like it wasn't not like the entertainment thing, whatever. People listen to podcasts for a lot more than just to be entertained. And that was totally off point. Like basically, so many people have reached out to me and been like, this is like a major part of my healing, this show. And so, yeah, like I'm just like, do it, everybody. Um, but so I made the podcast and I had already released this online course that I have that's about building a private practice and building it from like thinking about spiritual and emotional, psychological, political issues and building a practice. And I had made this little like promo video for my course. And so whatever, I'm like releasing my podcast, kind of just going along. And then I get this email from somebody. And when you start putting yourself out there, you might have this experience, Annie. Random people start contacting you with all kinds of stuff. And sometimes they contact you and it's a really cool opportunity. And sometimes it's some weird scam. So these people contacted me and they're like, "Hey, we love that online course you did. Would you want to turn it into a book?" And I was like, this is one of those scammers. Like, this is too, like, nobody actually gets this kind of email at random. And so, but I was like, okay, sure. Like, I'll check this out. Like, I'll talk to you. And so I got together with this person who is an acquisitions editor. And he was like, yeah, somehow like searching around your podcast, social media, whatever, I found your online class and I took that promo video you made and I used it as the pitch for the book to our editing team. Yeah, and I was like, it's just funny because you don't know what you're doing when you're doing it. Like when I was doing that, kind of just sitting there at home, like making this video over and over again, kind of being like, oh, that cut didn't work, like gotta redo it, and like uploading it to YouTube and doing all this stuff. I never thought, what you're doing right now? You're actually auditioning for a book. That's what's going on. So anyway, like basically the rest of the story is that I signed the book contract with them. And yeah, the actual process of writing it, it wasn't the pandemic. Oh, go ahead.
One question before that is like, how did you decide to take the contract? Like, what were there some signs for you of like, these are the people I should be working with? This feels good.
Yeah. So, okay. So that ties back into that part where I was like already really gearing up and being like, I think I have it in me. I think I could write a book. I was like, okay, you're going to write this book. It's going to be about this thing. And then when they came to me, I was like, all right, like, I don't know what to do because this really isn't the book I was envisioning myself writing. And yeah, I was kind of like, all right, if I write this book, then that's a long, long process. I mean, it's been like a couple of years now. I mean, didn't take 2 years to write the book, but it like, basically it's just it's a big commitment. So I was like, my other book's going to get postponed. And then I realized the next book I want to write, I think is going to be a lot harder to write. So I felt like this was good practice to write this book and just kind of get out there and do my first book. The other thing is that when I made that online course, I had scripted so much of it that I really actually had like the kind of bare bones of the book already written out. And I was like, all right, you can go off that. And one of the things they ask you to do when you're going to write a book is that you have to have some sample writing. So, like some sample chapters, unless you've already written a bunch of books and you're really, really famous. But if you're just kind of like starting out, you have to show them that you actually can write. So they were like, we'd love to give you this book contract, but we also need you to produce some writing first. And that was super easy because I had already written this like whole course. And so it's all kind of feeling like, all right, I think I can do this. And then ultimately, like, you don't get offered a book contract every day. Like, it just, like, I would talk to my friends, and they'd just be like, Laura, do you know how hard it is to get a book published? I mean, they're like, if you don't want to take this option, like, fine, but like, really know what you're saying no to. Yeah, and I kind of searched in myself and I was like, it's not that I'm not passionate about this. Like, I'm actually really passionate about this. It's just that I was thinking about doing something different. And yeah, it was like an opportunity to just kind of pivot and be like, this is actually not what you're going to do right now, this other book. You're going to write this one. And then I started working on it. And, I have so much passion for this topic. And so, like, I mean, I obviously you can tell. Yeah. So I pivoted, I wrote the kind of intro stuff to get the contract going. And then, so this is all pre-pandemic. And then the pandemic started. And you remember, like, at the very beginning, we're all like, this is going to take 3 weeks. So the contract came in like right before the pandemic started. And I hadn't signed it yet because I was kind of doing a little bit of extra stuff around it and just figuring out, the details. But yeah, so I signed it basically in that first month of the pandemic starting. And you know, in some ways, the fact that I wrote it for during the pandemic actually may have helped because I'm a very social person. I have a lot of work commitments, and this just like pared everything down, and it was all I was doing, and I didn't really have to say no to anything because there was nothing to do outside my house. But so how I would write it, I would turn my phone off, turn off my internet. I would literally unplug my internet for an entire week and just sit down and write.
You
And
would turn off your internet for a
yeah,
week?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So because it was a pandemic, so I couldn't be like, I'm going to go to a writing retreat or, whatever. I couldn't really go anywhere, but I was like, I'm just going to turn my house into the woods, basically. And yeah, yeah. I know people think that's really like people are like, well, wouldn't you have to research or anything? Sometimes I would actually take notes, like here's stuff to look up when the internet's on. And I found that, you can just always go to the internet to ignore everything. It's like, oh, well, I need to do a little more research. And it's a good exercise, I think, to push yourself into, yeah, but what can you write right now? Like, you can make a note in the writing, you can make a little comment like, hey, gotta double check this or fact check it. But what, with absolutely no interruption, what am I going to put on the page? And so that's a big way that I wrote it.
I would imagine too, I've not written a book, but I would imagine just from the other content I create, if you always hold off on doing the research, some of that research will not actually end up being necessary by the time you're ready to research because it may change, like what you're going to say may change before you even get there. Whereas if you go do the research immediately and get to the Googles, yeah, that's a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole and it takes up a lot of time. And you know what? Writing a book takes a lot of time anyways. So, and if I was writing a really research heavy book, I would obviously, be doing more research and I wouldn't be turning the internet off. But yeah, so that's a big part of how I did it. And it's such a process because, like, for an entire week, if I was writing, you don't really get that much done those first few days. And you have to kind of like not stress out and just go with the flow and know that you're going to increase your writing kind of muscles and that you'll be writing more as the week goes on. And I did definitely notice that. So when I very first started writing the book, I would need pristine environment, like no sound, everything's off. I'm really well fed. I have like a big chunk of time to write, and I'm gonna like eke out a paragraph and all that. But it's just like being an athlete. Like by the time I was done writing my book, I could have like a 30-minute break from clients and like bust out, like just be like, oh, you know what? I have that whole book mapped out in my mind. And I'm thinking in chapter 4, there's that kind of funky part. And I just had an idea how I can fix it. Like go in and just And you get less kind of anxious about like, I'm going to cut stuff and delete it and never have it again and add something new or change it, because it's like you just get so honed in. Like when I was early on in the book, the first 2 days of writing for a week might be even me just rereading what I had already written. By the end, it's like that thing is mapped out in my mind so clearly. It's almost like I know it word for word. I mean, obviously I don't, but it's like you go back and you kind of look at stuff and you know where everything is in every chapter.
Hmm. Do you think the more you're writing, like let's say even in that week, the more you're writing, like by the end of the week, you've let go of a lot of perfectionism?
Yes, and I think that by the time I was finishing the book, perfectionism had pieced out pretty hard. Like that definitely was really difficult in the beginning, Okay, so another thing about writing a book for anyone who's listening and wants to write a book is that you have to accept that you will spend days and days and days writing stuff that will not make it in the end of the book. Like it's not going to actually be in the book. And if you're a person who doesn't like to kind of like quote waste time, this is really hard to accept. And I'm a person like that. I would sit down and be like, all right, you're writing this paragraph and it's never going to change. And it's like, Laura, like this paragraph is, just this is unrealistic. And I think the important part to remember is that it's actually not a waste of time. All of that is actually you doing a very important process that may mean that you put something on a page and then you delete it and no one ever reads it, but it's a really important like honing and clarifying process in the actual outcome of the book.
Yeah, it's like compost, right? It's a really necessary part of the process, I'm hearing. Like you can't skip it.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you wanted, I mean, there's just no way to skip it. You're just going to write stuff that doesn't You're gonna write stuff that sucks. I mean, I remember there was one writing period where I wrote this whole thing and I was like, I'm done almost. I'm so close. Yeah, and then I had my people who were kind of the people I go to, and this is another really important part of writing a book is having people in your life who will actually read it. A lot of people say they will read your book and they won't, but the people who will actually read it, who will be brutally honest. And I really prefer brutal honesty because, I can't like once the book's out there, it's like you can't change it. You can't kind of go back and just be like, okay, everybody, that chapter was kind of whatever. But I remember this one session where I'd worked so hard and yeah, I sent it to my really, really trusted friend. Yeah, and she was just like, this is crap. It's really bad. I mean, she was nice about it, but she was just like, this is not good. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. I reread it from her lens and I was like, I don't know who I am anymore and why I thought this was good. It's bad. It's bad. So, and then I wrote something a lot stronger and.
Yeah. And it wasn't like you're bad or you don't have it in you. Like you had enough trust with this person to be able to take it as very specific feedback.
Yes, and also, another thing is, like, she had read many parts of my book and been like, "Yes, this is amazing. I'm feeling chills right now. This is so good. Thank you. This is what I need to hear." Yeah, so it's like when she's like, "This section feels like self-absorbed or just feels like you're missing the point or like it's really going to turn off people who are, struggling with their own self-esteem or something." It's like I believe her. Like she's showing me the love and it is I actually think giving negative feedback is really loving.
Absolutely. Yes. Like very direct feedback and like right on time, right in the moment. Yes.
And I think for everyone, you kind of find your flow of how you're going to get the feedback. So I'm a person where you can go pretty hard on me and be like, here, as long as you have a good reason for why the feedback is critical, I'm down to hear it. Like I don't know that everybody is going to want the friend who's like, this is total crap. So like everyone has to find their own way to get their negative feedback. But for me, that worked. Is just I don't want to like mess around with somebody kind of like softly telling me something and then I just am kind of missing it. I just rather the direct information.
I can relate to that. Like, oh my God, just tell me. I know there's something in there you're trying to say. I want to know what it is.
Yeah, and it's like it's such a huge process. It's just like like anything you're gonna say to me, trust me, I've already been that harsh to myself. Like just let me know what's up.
In just a minute, we're going to get back to Laura. First, I want to invite you to get on the wait list for Create Your Program. This is an 8-week process to expand beyond private practice and create your signature program. You're going to go from having an idea, or maybe you have a bunch of ideas, to actually launching a pilot program. And that could mean a retreat, a coaching program, a course, or some other fabulous program that you dream up. This is a small group experience where you'll get a lot of brave work done in a supportive group of driven and open-hearted entrepreneurs like you. This is designed to have you launching a paid program at the end of our time together or soon after. And folks are usually really surprised at how much support they get from me and from the structure of this experience. This is for you if you're a therapist or a healer and you want to expand your business. Go to rebeltherapist.me/create to learn more and get on the waitlist so you're the first to know when registration opens. All right, let's get back to Laura. So how many weeks or months of this, like how long did it take to write the book? I know that must be hard to actually answer. You probably didn't like track all your time, but like, what would your estimate be?
Yeah, so I would say I probably took about a month to do my book proposal, which is that section where you write a couple of chapters and you're kind of, just, doing a couple of, but yeah, there's a variety of things you do for that. That took, I think, about a month, maybe 2 months. And then I had a year contract date. So my contract, they offered it to me in the beginning of March of 2020, and I had to deliver it to them by March 2021. And book publishers will always be giving you a contract assuming that you're going to end up needing more time. And so I wrote my publisher a couple days before my deadline, and I was like, all right, I think I'm going to make it, but it's going to be at like 5:00 on Monday. And he's like, oh, Laura, if you want a couple, more weeks, like we could talk about it. And I was like, you couldn't pay me to keep working on this book. Like, I'm so ready. So I actually turned my book in on deadline 1 year from the contract date, which I know a lot of people don't do, but I'm just really into meeting deadlines. But so it took a year for that part to happen. And I think I want to say I took at least 4 weeks off work to write. I may have taken closer to 6 weeks off. That doesn't mean that I did not spend many, many weekends writing. And also because of the way my schedule is, I could take a whole admin day and turn it into a writing day if I didn't have too much admin to do, or since I wasn't doing as much teaching or as many like interviews and things like that, I had other times. So it's not like I didn't only worked on it those 6 weeks, but I think I had like 4 to 6 weeks of solid, like your internet's off and you're just doing this time.
So is this whole thing so far, does it feel like very clearly worth it to you?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, you learn so much about yourself writing a book. I really had to grow like myself. And I think this is a really important part of being a healing practitioner is like you actually get to really benefit from the experience of all the work that you do to support other people. So I definitely had to grow myself. Also, it's just amazing all the people you get to connect with when you're doing work that's public facing. I mean, it's also amazing as a therapist, all the people I connect with, but I really enjoy like the conversations that come out of it. And especially in doing interviews about the book, like I get to hear about, because people have obviously read it, I get to hear about what they think and about their work and how their practices are run so it's really inspiring and just super interesting for me. And then also I feel like writing it, I came to a point where I definitely had like something emerged in me where I was like, I'm a writer. This is not the last book I'm going to write. And I think before that, I kind of was like in this place, I was like on the training wheels, just kind of being like, all right, I think I have it in me. Like, I think I could write a book. And now I'm just like, oh yeah, I can write another book. I definitely know that. And I could see myself even writing many other books. I don't know that is what I will do, but that I can
You
feel
can.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Do you have a writing practice now that the book is done? Do you have any kind of regular writing practice?
Well, so I'm trying to put out some new episodes of my podcast, which is definitely some writing. I will say also, I journal. I'm a hardcore journaler. I've been journaling for almost 30 years. So that is definitely like my regular writing practice. Yeah. And more so the way I think about my writing kind of practice is all the things that I know have to get into place for me to actually write. And for me, that is like you are blocking out time where you will not have to be on the internet, you will not have to use your phone, and there's not like a meeting kind of floating around near it. So like an entire day or an entire weekend. And I don't do that on the regular, like every first, Sunday or something. But I do start to, when I have a project that I'm gearing up for, I start to look out to the upcoming months and start being like, okay, here's these chunks of time that you're going to go in and kind of do all the things that get you prepped and do it.
And you block that out on your calendar?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is like you want to do a project that's like a book. It's like, it's just not going to happen 20 minutes before bed, like it's just, you've got to put it in your calendar, block it out, protect the time. And as a person who's social, this is like one of my major dilemmas in life is like blocking the time out and being like, nope, no, I'm free, but like I can't see you that day, or I can't say yes to this other thing, to just really kind of, it has to be protected.
Yeah. You have to know what you're going to be willing to say no to make it happen. I think as healers, also, like we have that muscle, we just have to use it. Like we don't have a hard time showing up for our sessions. Like we don't get like confused about that. Like, oh, but I want to hang out with my friend, but I do have this session at 2. Which one should I do?
Yeah.
We show up. We show the fuck up. And so I think it's like using that muscle in this other way too, where we show up for a project that we really care about.
Yeah, you have to be so committed to yourself and to your work and to the people you're ultimately going to serve. And when you write a book, it is really, it's lonely. Like you're just kind of like, okay, in 2 years someone's going to read this, like, and you kind of have to stay connected. And I talk in the book a bit about like ways that I think people can do that, but definitely I write myself notes, I do ritual practices, I pray, like I just sit there and I'm like, all right, someone out there right now that you don't know is waiting for you to finish this book, and they don't even know it and you don't know them, and that connection is going to happen in like a year or two, but you need to block this weekend out because like that's, you are actually like meeting someone at 2. It's just like not they're not going to be there that weekend with you, but like you're showing up to an appointment for sure.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, that time that we block out, it's like we tell ourselves like, "Oh, it's because so and so asked me to go on a hike, and so I'm not blocking it out," or whatever. I think it's because we're afraid to sit down and start writing. I mean, that's what I came to as a writer, is just like it's fucking scary to go stare at a blank page and be like, something's got to come out of me. And there's such an art to the difference between forcing yourself to write something down and surrendering to the process of something coming out of you. And it's difficult. I have spent weeks where I'm forcing and then I'm like, what the hell have I been doing? This isn't very good. And I've spent weeks where I've hit the flow state and I'm surrendering and the words are just pouring out of me. Obviously, that's great when you can get there. It's such a mindset, and it's scary to be like, I'm going to write today, and then sit down and be like, all right, I wrote like 2 pages. Like that's what I did. And, I got to feel okay about it.
So, okay, I also want to get back to this course that you created. So you have this course, How to Build a Sustainable Private Practice as a Healer, and you've told us the story of kind of like how that actually, and the video behind that, ended up leading to the book. And you're really honest about how like the information is all out there. So that's not so much what the course is about. The information, like we've got the Googles, we can find anything, but your course is more also about moving through a personal, spiritual, and emotional journey in your business and in your healing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the course is about this, and the book is about this too. I just really think about, I mean, even just now, how I was saying, I think that the real reason that a lot of times we have all these distractions and we don't make the time to write the book or write the website or, plan out the course or whatever we're trying to do in our practices is because we're actually just afraid to sit there and face it. And that's an emotional issue. And I actually think it's a spiritual issue too. And I don't talk about spirituality from sort of a religious place, like where it's like a specific modality of thinking, but more just, what does it mean to be your true essence in this lifetime? What are you here to do while you have your time on earth? And how will you engage with that, and how much will you sort of go towards it versus shy away from it? So these are emotional and spiritual issues, I think. And I think also there's a whole political lens that I could take on it too. But so really what a lot of the course is about, and what a lot of the book is about, and just what a lot of I'm trying to kind of support healing practitioners to do, is to really dive into the emotional work and the spiritual work that it takes to sit down and do the things like write the website, to get through imposter syndrome. And I know for a lot of people, thinking about it from an emotional lens is pretty like normal. It's like, oh, imposter syndrome. Okay. Like, yeah, that's because I have low self esteem, let's say. But I'm even like, when people are, for example, like, yeah, I just haven't made time to like do a budget. There's something there. There's something there to understand around your relationship to money and your relationship to managing money. And I just think as long as we sort of tell ourselves that it's not an emotional issue or it's not a psychological issue, we just really rob ourselves of the ability to do the healing work we need to do. And we also end up sometimes not actually succeeding in our practices. And in my work with people who are trying to build a practice, it's there's just so many ways people really like, what is the word? Just unconscious is the word. So many ways it can be really unconscious to you when you're in it, and it's so clear to someone else who's outside of it. Yeah, and I'm sure you know this, Danny, because it's like a whole big part of like supporting people in this is it's like, yeah, the reason you don't want to put your photo on your website, it's not just because you don't have a good picture. Like it's because you're scared. You're scared, and that's a feeling. So yeah, that's what a lot of where I kinda that's the kinda starting point that I'm at when I'm working with somebody and trying to think through, like, what is going on that you're not feeling successful enough or that you're struggling to take the next step?
That's great. And you're not colluding with them then on believing it's just there's a missing piece of information or there's like an app that will solve this for them.
Yeah, and I think this is, I say a little bit about this in the online course and the book that when you get out there and you're trying to build a business, let's say, there is a lot of advice about the exact way that you need to do it. And all of that, while it can be useful, you don't have to do it exactly like that. So, like, for example, one big thing is, having some kind of like timer countdown on everything. So people they have to buy a product on a timeline, and you're basically stressing them out with the possibility they won't get it or that they won't get it for as cheap. And super common thing to do, totally fine if you wanna do it. But for some people, it stresses them out to be like to to kinda be in this, like, timeline thing where you're sending a million emails and you're doing, like, a sales funnel and yada, 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 and, everyone listening who's, like, done their research probably knows what I'm talking about. Like, you don't
Yes.
have to do that. There's a lot of ways to run a business, but that is kind of the industry standard at this point. And I say all this to say, like, you also can have emotional feelings of or feelings about how something is done, and you don't necessarily have to work through them to the point that you want to do it some other way. You can also be like, yeah, I'm going to have to find a way to do my business where I don't do that thing. Like where I never do public speaking or I never run a sales funnel or I don't know. I don't have a website. Granted, I think you should have a website, but I know people who are really successful with no website. So sometimes you can do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. A local therapy practice? Absolutely. Like, yeah, again, like not, I don't want to go on the record recommending that because I want people to succeed. And that's a good, really good tool.
Yeah, websites are pretty important. Yeah.
Okay. So countdown timers, I think are such a great example. I've talked about this and I've said before, like, I'm never going to use them again. And then I started using them again in a very specific way. And then also explaining to people, hey, here's what this timer is here for. Here's what it's not here for. It's not here to scare the hell out of you. But yeah, deciding what we want our businesses to look like and what kind of relationship we want to have with our businesses and with our clients and participants. I love that.
Yeah, that's so interesting you bring up the timer thing. I'm curious why you had decided not to. And also it's so interesting like So much of what we struggle with is motivation. Like, I think as a therapist and myself as a practitioner, I struggle with this obviously too, but when I think about it as a therapist, so much of what we're working against is like a lack of desire to take an action. And I can see how a timer, it kind of gives you a kick in the butt. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to take action. But anyway, this is sort of, that's a tangent, but I'm curious, why did you want to stop using them and then decide to use them again?
I only experimented with using them one time in the beginning with my coaching business, and it didn't feel right because I've had bad experiences with timers where like I've been interested in someone's work and thought I might want to explore someone's work, and then as soon as I signed up for like a webinar or something, I was thrown into a funnel and a countdown timer where I felt like, wait, I wasn't ready. And this thing isn't actually going to not be available anymore. This is just a created timer to get me moving, but this isn't the right time, but I know it will be the right time. So now I'm all freaked out about the discount I'm not going to get if I sign up when it is the right time for me. So that was very unappealing. And it had me, I think this happens to a lot of folks, and these metrics don't get into the metrics of these businesses. But I think that's happened to a lot of folks where then I've avoided even signing up for someone's free stuff because I'm not ready to be in that funnel or that ringer. And so I didn't want to do that to people. I use a countdown timer right now as we're recording this. It's like January 2022. I use one right now for my programs when they actually are going to be closing. Like when there's a true date, when there's a deadline, I'm really not taking any more folks after that moment. And I want to make the math really easy for people. So I know for me, that just saves me time. If I can see, all right, like on one of my programs right now, there's 6 more days for people to sign up. So as soon as they open the email and they read to the end, they're going to see this timer. And it's not bright red, but it's there saying, I've got this many days and this many hours. And maybe even that makes them feel like, oh, I don't have to decide yet. I have a minute to ask any more questions. So yeah, that's my like, I don't think there's a right or a wrong to this, but like that's my nuanced navigation at this point.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like you're using a timer that's like realistic, like there's actually a deadline. Yeah. Yeah, and I hear you on the sales funnel thing. Like, the second a sales funnel starts, I'm like, "Okay, unsubscribe. I'm done. I'm done. I know where this goes. You're gonna send me a million emails. You're gonna send me one that's, like, really emotional and heartfelt about your story and, like, all this stuff." Because, I mean, I've done enough marketing research that I totally like, I get it. And, I'm sure it's really effective. I mean, I know it's really effective because people are, really using them a lot, but they stress me out. So, I'm a non-sales funnel person.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. Okay. Your course is completely self paced at this point. How did you decide that? And like, are you like going to stick with that? Or are there ever times when you want to work with people, like give people access to working with you directly around the course?
Yeah, this is a great question. So when I put the course out, I was, I think, in the middle of making my podcast. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do like live, Q&As and stuff like that. So it just kind of made sense at the time to make it totally be, self-paced and people can just kind of go plug in and get all the information. This question kind of gets into that longer question, like longer game question of what am I doing with my career? So I'm kind of at this moment where like I definitely want to hone more of what I'm doing. Like if somebody offered me a book contract today that was like on a book that's not what I want to write a book on, I don't know if I would take it this time around. And I don't mean to say that I didn't want to write that book because I really, really did. It was just sort of a pivot. But yeah, so I love teaching. I don't love teaching online. I'm realizing through the pandemic because I've taught a lot online at this point now. Maybe I'm going to turn a corner where I start to love it more, but I don't. And I just really miss being in person. And I think that eventually I'm maybe going to start leaning more toward running retreats. Like I actually want to be even more in person with people. And I know that, that totally goes against like So before the pandemic, people wanted to make online courses because it's like you have all this material that you make. It's almost, people think of it as passive income because you're not having to recreate the course every time and you're not having to teach it live. I just like am finding that I want to be in person with people, that I actually want to work that much more. So I do have some thoughts about doing something that's maybe more of a retreat where there's a little bit of online content, like maybe somebody's watching a couple of lectures or we're doing like something that's more online, and then leading up to the in-person portion that's actually really in depth. And then maybe there's some stuff that they're accessing on the other end of that is some form of, just something that's kind of helping them to keep going. So that's kind of more where I'm thinking I'm going to go. But at this moment, I mean, I'm just trying to get my book birthed and then I'll decide what the next step is. But that's where I thought, my thoughts on that.
Retreats are so good. All right. Anything else that I didn't ask you want to leave us with before we have to say goodbye?
Yeah, I think one other thing I'll say that I emphasize in the course and I also emphasize in the book, and it's just something I like to emphasize in general for practitioners of any kind, is, practicing healing work is really, really hard. Like the work that we do it's heavy lifting. It's supporting people through sometimes some of the hardest stuff they're going to do in their lives. And I just think it's so important that we are taking care of ourselves in a way that allows us to have fun and have a joyful life. And also that your practice is and what you're doing is actually really meaningful for you. And when we're not doing something meaningful for us, that's when we start getting burnt out. So I really believe this. I really believe that, to whatever degree we actually have control over things, which obviously there's many ways we don't have control over things that happen in life, but the parts we do have control over, just building a practice that's really, really like working for you, and also that feeds you and is enjoyable and is aligned with what you're meant to be doing. And that is like the other just huge thing I'm trying to inspire people to do, not to run a practice that's like what you think somebody else is doing or what you think is going to be the most successful or what your colleagues approve of or whatever, but really just tapping into that deeper path, that deeper sort of calling. So that's my last my last little bit I want to share.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura. This has been just such a pleasure getting to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Annie.
You can find out more about Laura at lauramaenorthrup.com. To get 35% off on her book, Radical Healership, go to northatlanticbooks.com and select Radical Healership, and then use the code REBEL35. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast and Jessica Riscala for producing it. If you found this conversation supportive, please share it with your favorite therapist or healer. That is absolutely how we reach more people. And thank you so much for listening. I'll be with you next time.